businesses are going to have to be making decisions that may or may not determine their survival. So for that person you're wanting to help to have a job on the other side of it, there are going to be competing priorities that we have to talk through.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story, and it is the story of how we got to the point where we finally hit record on this episode.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. So last night we were bantering back and forth, just trying to decide what time we scheduled today, and which almost became the topic for this episode, which was going to be on this new kind of weird thing about, which maybe next episode, when there's not things to choose times by, there's less constraints. And so you were making jokes like, well, I have a hard stop at 11 because I have to, what did you say? Like, I have to walk around.
I'm walking around the basement at noon. So.
And I said, well, I might be late because I'm organizing the spice cabinet. And then we proceeded to have probably an hour and a half long back and forth making really bad spice puns. So that was stage one. By the way,
yes.
Confession, I had to, at one point, I cheated a tiny bit and had to Google a list of spices because I couldn't think of additional spices to use for puns. I didn't look up spice puns. I didn't cheat that badly, but I did go look up a list of spices just to help me generate more puns. I really wanted marjoram to be like majority, but.
Well, I had two that I couldn't make work. One was caraway because I kept thinking carried away, but it wasn't close enough.
Not quite.
And then I was going, here's one that's going to set you back a little bit. I was going for basil cell, and I'm thinking, oh, nothing in that is good.
Ew, no, that's
not good.
Gross. If you can work basil cell into a sentence, like I don't, that's not a conversation I want to be.
Yeah, but anyway, so.
Okay. So that was last night. And I was looking forward to quite a humorous but still very poignant, because I think a lot of that stuff is coming up conversation.
Oh, and by the way, just quick thing here. Anybody who was at our first, but certainly not last, virtual happy hour would not be at all surprised that we took like an hour and a half on puns.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, seriously. No, plenty of puns all over the place. So that was last night. And then I proceeded, as has been the case the last couple of nights, to barely sleep last night. And there's sort of like Jodi's carriage turns to a pumpkin on like night 3 of not getting a great night's sleep. I get a little extra emotional and sort of raw. And I woke up this morning, I was just feeling like really down. And we were scheduled at 10:30. And things transpired. I wasn't feeling great, and I decided I needed to like take a bath or take a walk or something. And so I texted you, and we pushed the time back a little bit, and you were fine with that, which was great.
Yeah. I pushed off my walk around the basement till a little bit later.
Right. And I promise this does have a point, because this is not turning out as a very scintillating story. It gets more interesting. People are like, oh my God, is there a story here? I promise it leads to a story. So, but that whole pushing back the episode because of how I was feeling was a topic that as I texted you, I was like, maybe this is really poignant because it's coming up for my clients, whether it's somebody feeling sad or down, or whether it's just they're more snappish, or they're more short-tempered, or they're acting not more childishly, but just, I lack the words here, but like I'm seeing kind of emotions creep around edges in a lot of places. And so I suggested we maybe do that as a topic, to which I got a very cold response via text. And then hysterically,
it wasn't a cold response.
Yes, it was.
No,
you were like, or we could do this.
No, first of all, what I said was, which is relevant here, I said that you have significantly overestimated my emotional range.
Fair enough. Okay, I just remembered it was like a brush off of one kind or another. So fair enough. You're right. That is relevant. So then we come on the call and proceed to have for like an hour what I don't know that I would quite qualify it as a fight, but kind of. I mean, would you say like it was more of a heated conversation than I think you and I have ever had before?
Well, I don't even know that it was heated. There were definitely two sides to it.
Right. So, but we were, so I guess maybe the way I'll say it, because this does tie into it, is what was, again, all these words feel a little bit overdramatic. What was frustrating for me about it was less that we had different opinions, because we've had different opinions on things. I have zero need for other people to share my opinions. I'm often fascinated by their different opinions. I felt like we were talking past each other, and that was frustrating. Like I felt like I don't know, there was just, it didn't feel like a normal one of our conversations. Like,
No, well, you hurled what I think is the most the most hostile and adversarial Jodi insult to hurl at me, which is, I think, Eliot, you're viewing this in a binary way and without nuance. And I think that's Jodi speak for, throwing hands. That is just, that's the
that
most
is my
vicious
version
you
of
get.
fisticuffs. It's true. I did say that. Wow. That was probably the high. No, it's true, because I'm like, what? Because it was weird. We were both sort of in that conversation in a way that we're not normally in a conversation. But this is exactly why I wanted to bring this up. Is, I almost wish we'd recorded. I really wish that we had recorded that part of the conversation, if nothing else, to go back and get snippets out of. Because one thing I heard was, when I was saying, like, we need to make space for things emotionally. I'll super truncate here, because I think some of the high points are important, or low points, depending on how you look at it. I was sort of coming to it saying, people are, whether it's because they are going to be knowing people who are sick and that's scary, or whether it's because they're just being driven crazy at home, or like 10,000 reasons that their emotions might be feeling a little more near the surface than normal, they might be coming to conversations differently than they normally do. And as leaders and as coworkers and as spouses and parents and whatnot, we should just be aware of that, much in the same way that you are aware that, like, a toddler is throwing a fit because they really need a nap, that it's not about the blue cup, it's because they're exhausted or whatever. But you were also making this also true statement that, like, it's not your job to then be therapist and making accommodations
Right.
endlessly, and that at some point business is important. And we were going back and forth and back and forth. Here's the important thing. We got to this really important thing because you made a joke initially in the text about you're overestimating my emotional depth. But what you are extremely good at, and what I didn't mention, is your radar for people's emotional state is really highly tuned, I think. Does that feel does that feel right?
No, that's true. That is true.
Because what I left out was, I simply texted you this morning, can we do 11 instead of 10:30? And you said, sure. Are you okay? And I was like, ooh, weird spidey sense. Like, and you wouldn't, like, somehow you knew. Like, it was like, that was interesting to me. It's not the first time you've done that. Whereas other times I might push and you don't ask if I'm okay. Somehow you just know. So you have a really high radar for noticing. And I think, and I point that out because where we diverged, and why I think this is important to talk through, is what happens after noticing.
Correct.
My point is, a lot of humans out there have gotten to this point in the world where they weren't good at noticing that somebody was feeling off, and they've been able to function just fine that way. And I think in the current state we are in and are going to be in for a while, that luxury is not, you have to be able to notice. And then whether or not it's your responsibility to fix it, I don't think we disagree at all there. I think it's the noticing part that has to be turned up.
Well, and I agree with that. I don't disagree at all with the noticing part, but what I was taking issue with, and maybe it was a straw man because it wasn't what you were saying, but very often in my professional career, I have felt called upon, and I have been called upon to be more of a counselor, to have employees want to talk this out or talk that out. And I don't want to be in any way unclear here. I care deeply about the people I work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, I believe that, once I notice that something is going on, I want to give people space. I want to allow them to resolve it. I want to allow them to operate. But I don't believe it's fair to expect me, or that I should be called upon to take an active role in helping them solve it, other than providing them that space and certain accommodations. I don't want to counsel people on how to get through their grief or hold their hand through this breakup or whatever it happens to be. And I've been called upon to do that so often that Nikki kept saying long before the stocking up on TP for the pandemic that I should stock up on Kleenex in my office because I have people cry in my office about non-work things. And, one of the things that you had said in a previous conversation, and I didn't highlight it when you said it, but I certainly took it in because I wasn't familiar with what you were referencing. You said, I think you were talking about love languages, and you said that certain people, their love language is acts of service. And I had never heard that before, but that is definitely the camp that I fall in.
Yeah.
I would much rather do something for somebody or demonstrate whatever, but I am not particularly with non-family or whatever. I'm not just a hugger and a cry on my shoulder and a let's talk through how X person was meaningful to you. That I'm not that guy.
Right.
And I took issue with my perception that you were saying that leaders had to be that guy.
Well, actually, and so this is, oh, wow. Okay. This is super fascinating now because you layer in the love languages, which I think are super important right now. It's on 10 different levels. One, it's important because that is one of the things that will be showing up in people's emotions. If you are a physical touch person and you're not, which if you're not, this is hard to understand, but please know that whichever one you are, the others are hard to understand and other people don't understand yours. That's part of the lesson here is that different people have, in the same way we've talked about extroversion and introversion, and people are starting to get it a little bit more now. They understood it intellectually. Now they're understanding it more viscerally because introverts have people in their space all day long and extroverts are like, oh my God. Well, people who are physical touch people, unless they live with other physical touch people, and even if they do, though, that's different than the physical touch nutrition that you get from hugging close friends or that kind of thing. It's a sort of extroverted physical touch. Doesn't have to be romantic, doesn't have to be intimate, just like the hugs, the tap on the arm while you're making a point. Like some people are just touch oriented, and it is a vitamin that they will feel a deficiency of, and they won't even be able to name it. They'll just be feeling edgy because they're underserved with that vitamin. Words, love languages. The other one is words of affirmation, like talking things through verbal connection. Those people are doing okay right now because they can talk, they can write, sure. They can. So they're okay. Quality time is another one, which is just like being with people. That one's a little tricky. There's Zoom meetings, but direct attention and whatnot. There's sort of a mix there. Gifts, again, tricky, whatever. But the physical touch one is definitely a one that I think shows up as another thing. But it also comes back to, sorry, I got weirdly off track there. I realized my laptop is low on battery and I don't see the power source, so I'm trying not to get distracted. But recording at home.
No, I like the fact that you were pointing out something that's not related to what your point was and then rounding that out with, so I'm trying not to be distracted. I just thought that was funny.
It is. But the other thing too, though, is because you are an acts of service person, I think that it is part of why when someone reaches out to you, that what you hear is that like, I have a job to do here, that like, it's my job, like, because it's what you lean on as how to be helpful is that I take action. I do a thing to make this better. And that was where we were really off kilter in this angry hour before we recorded was, the thing that I was wanting to surface is super important. I do not associate inherently, if you want to do this, if you're this kind of person, that's fine. I do not associate it with becoming somebody's therapist or becoming their problem solver or having to accommodate their every need at the expense of the business. That's a super nuanced piece that there's going to be lots of figuring that out together in the next few months. There are going to be personal needs balanced against business needs. And while it's very lovely to say, I'll use another example to make this point. When I used to do like talks on time, strategic use of time, people would say, well, you have to know your priorities, family comes first. And I'm like, well, family absolutely comes first in the bigger picture of the world. There's no place I could be that if I got a call that my kid had been injured, I wouldn't walk out the door. But that doesn't mean that every single Tuesday evening, if I'm deciding whether to go home and see my kids or go to a networking event, that I always pick family. It's not a broadly applicable decision tool. And I think that is similar this way as well with businesses, because businesses are going to have to be making decisions that may or may not determine their survival. So for that person you're wanting to help to have a job on the other side of it, there are going to be competing priorities that we have to talk through.
Right. And so here's the thing, you know, obviously, people are having a very difficult time right now. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. And so even,
we are?
yeah, but well, I know you're laughing about that, but sometimes it doesn't, if you haven't been struck by this,
yeah, sometimes
it doesn't feel like global pandemic sounds like the huge crisis, humanitarian and economic, that it is. But if you haven't been struck by this,
with the rainforests and poverty and hunger, all of things I care deeply about, but they're not right there on your door, so they feel
so if you, as I was saying, if you haven't been struck by this, then sometimes you're sitting at home and it's just a change in circumstance, et cetera. But you can recognize that even if your employees aren't sick, there's this external weight that descends upon people just with all of the headlines and all of everything on their feed and what the stories that they're hearing about the emergency room personnel in New York or wherever. It takes an emotional and even intellectual toll.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and so there are, and this was the point, this was what my concern was when you had brought up the topic for the episode. It's inarguable that a leader in business should make space for those things and recognize on a personal level what's happening to the people around him. I strongly believe that, and I hope, frankly, that there is a karma for business leaders who don't recognize the humanity and the situation of their employees now. I think they should pay for that later. I do think that there's a duty to recognize the people for whom you're responsible. However, my concern was that with all of the emphasis on business leaders having to recognize and accommodate what's going on with the workforce and their employees, et cetera, that there was no room for the legitimate concerns that business leaders have with getting business results, even in the midst of this pandemic.
No, I hear you. I mean, because there is a natural inclination up until I have a suspicion that this might be one of the things that is slightly different, at least temporarily. I don't know if this will last, but for better or for worse, because I think both things are true at the same time. The sort of prevailing thought is that not that business is bad, but that if you're choosing like business results over human need, that is like morally less good, at least, right? I mean, like,
don't be binary.
You've just been like, are you laying in wait to say
I
that?
am. I'm that hurt me deeply.
you were like poised like a cat ready to pounce. I was like, what is this? You must want to say something super important. And then you jumped in with that. Hello, petty Eliot. See, this is a perfect example though. So here's the thing. Like, so yes, there is sort of this prevailing kind of feeling coming into this that like if you choose, because in times of great prospering, it is gross if you're saying like, well, I'm just gonna, if you heartlessly lay off a bunch of people just so that you can get another yacht or whatever, that's sort of the the version of it that's gross. That's
true, because my current yacht is good enough. It is. It's good enough.
Exactly. I mean, I have 3, but one of them is okay. No.
Well, right. One of them's just,
One of them I'm sure is fine. So there's that. But even before this, there was also a different version of that you're right, sometimes gets overlooked. I've originally, when this very, very first started, I heard people saying, especially about small businesses like restaurants, well, they should still pay their employees. And I'm like, if they can, but But that says to me that you don't necessarily understand how tight margins are for restaurant businesses and how they are
Very
often
tight.
running less than week to week. Like they are
Yeah.
often paycheck to paycheck, sometimes skipping. Not all of them. Again, I'm not talking about Applebee's necessarily. Like I think every time you're
Probably
like, yeah,
might be, but yeah.
yeah, I might be. I don't know. Every version of yeah, but ... Like there is going to be a nuance, which by the way could be a whole other episode of the intolerance, like the desperate desire for there to be certainty is what causes people to jump to binary things a lot. You want to have something you can be like, yeah, that's the answer. And for better or for worse, there's just a ton of nuanced uncertainty here. But oh my gosh, I lost my point again. What is wrong with me? See, this is what happens when I don't sleep a lot. But the emotional piece. So, but going forward, it's all the more real that was the point I was getting to. I think people, at least anybody who's thinking even remotely broadly, understands that for the business that they work for right now to get to the other side of this, that is also, it's like recognizing that there are people in the boat and previously not being willing to remember that you also have to take care of the boat in order for the people in the boat to get to the other island. In this metaphor, the boat is the business.
Thanks.
I think there's a heightened, I think there's a heightened awareness that the boat matters too. I think, I could be wrong about that, but I do think there's an opening, as you said, to have those conversations. Well, like, okay, you guys need this, or you need this, or as a person, this is important. And we need this to get the boat to the other side of the things. It's just acknowledging all the truths.
There may be, and I don't want to get too far off, but it reminds me of this email that David, my oldest, got yesterday. And because he's at Boulder, and a lot of the students at Boulder live off campus in apartments, and so they're home. Most of them left Boulder because classes either didn't resume or they're now online and stuff like that. So they came home. So there was this email that came out from the landlord, the management company for the landlord, and was talking about how, hey, just wanted to let you know. Now, he expected them to say, we're forgiving rent. You don't have to pay rent during this time or whatever. And what they said is, just wanted to remind you that a lot of these, they're what we would call townhouses, but a lot of these places, they're owned by retirees who need this income. They rely upon this income to go forward, some more than others, but they do. And they were humanizing the business side, the need to pay your rent. So please pay your rent because these people depend on it. Right. Because otherwise there seems to be, in many sections of society, there is this binary choice between, well, if it's affecting me, I'm going to base all of my actions on the way this is affecting me. Mm-hmm. And that means that why should I pay rent because I'm not there, even though I signed this document or whatever? And so people are having to justify business necessities with personal stories more than I think they had to before.
And I think that for better or for worse, and this is showing up in several layers of this global crisis, is we are seeing this fundamental glitch, I would consider it, in the human experience, where we don't seem to be able to learn from other people's experiences very often. We don't seem to be able to grasp them, understand them, unless we have had that experience. And we see it in, I was on this call with this woman from Germany on this international group that's doing a bunch on like communications and disinformation stuff, trying to get in front of some of the really bad misinformation out there. And we were talking about how you can get people to understand that this is important and they should stay home. And she said, look, this is a great conversation and you should absolutely try. But at least in our experience here in Germany, at the end of the day, until people start hearing it and seeing it up close, relatives or even a friend of a friend kind of thing, they're just not, there are some people who are just not going to take it in. And I think the same is true with, anyone whose immediate response is, well, the landlord should forgive rent. That says to me, what I hear in that is, oh, you apparently don't own rental properties, nor do I, but like I have lots of clients who do, who are some of them panicking, some of them not worried at all, and sending out emails that say, you know what, the next 2 months, there's not going to be rent, because they can take that and they're wanting to help their people. Those who literally get the rent check and then write their check for the mortgage for the building, they're freaking out. And so what I think you get to hear, and this does tie back to the original point, is we need an expanded empathy, or like, I don't know how you can just instantly expand empathy, but just the awareness. Because here's what I think, and this was kind of my point in the beginning. If someone you work with either works for you, that you work for, colleagues, friends, family, whatever, anyone you know, if I'm not worried about the moments where they're like, my husband's in the hospital or my dad's in the hospital, like that's a kind of human experience we do recognize. I think there's plenty of empathy for that, right, when that starts happening. I'm more concerned, and no one's going to expect like, all right, Susan, get together on the Zoom call. It doesn't matter that your husband's in the hospital. Like, people, we're going to have to navigate that whether we like it or not. My concern is that there are a million other reasons, much like this morning, that was a little myriad collage of things that just put me in, I needed a little bit of space before we got on and did this call. And I think that's going to start happening a lot more, where people come to a call or try to do a thing and they're just not themselves. And if you're not good at noticing it, they're going to be trying like hell to cover it up, and they may not be acting their best. And if they get judged for that, it's just this, I don't know. It feels like we're going to be having like lots of weird, awkward, harder moments and conversations. And if we could just pan back and say, oh, like, you okay? Or just like, should we do this at a different time? Or like, I don't know what the answers are, but I just want the awareness turned up.
I think where you and I got to was that an agreement that there should be a heightened antenna as to when somebody needs more space, but a business leader shouldn't feel an obligation to fill it.
Perfect.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
Your stories.
You can find links to that group, as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email, and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jodi Hume.
And I'm Eliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.